All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us again on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC podcast. This episode brought to you by Hudson Technologies. Joining us today, we have Kate Houghton from Hudson. How are you doing?
Doing fabulous. Thank you so much for having me back once again.
I absolutely love the conversations we get into because it's such a very fast-changing industry. And when we start talking about like refrigerants and regulations in particular, man, it's like a whirlwind. And if you're not partnered with the right professionals in the industry and getting that firsthand information, you might think you know what's going on and you could be months behind.
Yeah, you're really right. I mean, the pace at which things are changing and happening, and legislation that starts to happen and gets changed and issued and gets pulled back, it's just kind of all a full-time job to really to pay attention to it. And so that's one of the things that I love about our chats is we try to help people with that.
That's exactly it. So let's think about some things that have changed recently that people should be aware of. One that I've been getting a lot of, and it's like, okay, I'll be happy to talk to you about this one. It's going to take a little bit because we got to look at some different aspects of it. They go, okay, so we're going to like roll back the AIM Act and we're going to start using R-410A and R-22 again in new equipment, right? And I'm like, yeah, no. It's not going to happen.
No, that's not really on the cards.
No.
There's certainly been a lot of hyperbole, if you will, about looking at different elements. And so there was a CRA, which is a Congressional Review Act on Subsection H, which is a legal process and an incoming administration could do. It was put on the list, but as of 2 weeks ago, it's not on the list for the House to even start looking at and reviewing it. And so there's probably 40 or 50 CRAs that are actively being worked, and the AIM Act is not one of them.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that's great news from that perspective, absolutely.
Yeah, because I wasn't even aware of that. So that's really, really, really good to know because there's a lot of people concerned about it. And I also tell them, too, that even if they did, like in the AIM Act, you know, we're really talking about like the whole regulatory side of refrigerant management and leak rates, right? We're not talking about getting rid of the refrigerants. We're not talking about the technology transition rule. We're really talking about those things that happened in those last 60 days.
That's right.
That they have the opportunity to go back and look at. And the ones that would have been or potentially would have been the most threatened would have been leak rates, regulations tracking.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was at Subsection H, which was the last, and it was really in the CRA by the CRA period by just a number of days.
Yeah,
it was really very close. So yes, the allocation system, solid.
Yeah.
Nothing can happen there. The technology transition rule, also very solid.
Yep.
So it really was the Subsection H refrigerant management rule. As I said, it's not a priority. It's not even on the list at this point to actually go through review. So.
Oh, wow. So really, when we look at the grand scheme of things, even if it was to go through, it would be some changes, but it wouldn't be like this industry changing, actions that people have been worried about, which that's why we do these podcasts to help break that fiction.
Absolutely. So, 454B, 32, 513, 540, all of those new refrigerants that were marching forward with that, sunsetting the new 410A equipment, it can still be installed for the rest of the year.
Right.
And 410A is not sunsetting. You and I have talked about the incredibly large installed base that's around the country. So 410A as a refrigerant isn't going away.
Right.
How you get it, what source of it
look and feel different.
Might be different, but the refrigerant itself will be here for 20 plus years to come.
Yeah, exactly. And so getting that refrigerant back is like the most important thing. I mean, we have to reclaim. We have to be very responsible on getting that refrigerant back so you can turn it into new refrigerant for us so we can put back in service.
Absolutely. I mean, as you start to think about not just the AIM Act and the requirements for reclaimed refrigerant in certain sectors, you look at what's happened in California and their regulations starting January 1, you have to have reclaimed refrigerant. All state-owned buildings have to be serviced with reclaimed refrigerant. What happened in New York wasn't well organized, but
boy, that's a whole that's a podcast. Just New York,
that's a podcast in itself, exactly. But New York is doing that, which California has done, and they're going to clean that up. Washington is looking at the same thing. So all of these regulations are going to add and continue to build. And the most important thing any one of us can do is recover every pound of refrigerant because every pound is valuable at this point.
Yeah.
And we really have to reach those folks who are unaware of that importance and grow not just the amount of pounds that the folks recovering now are doing, but really reaching a larger audience and getting more participation. It's becoming so much more critical.
I thought I had an understanding of what reclamation looked like at a distributor level, because I spent quite a few years in that level, where I had all my contractors bringing me refrigerant. We had lots of these open conversations, and I did a training class for a distributor. It's been about 4 or 5 months ago. And it was a really good distributor, and it was in a state that I'd not been in before. And I was having this discussion as part of my A2L training, right? Yep. This is what we have to do. This is how you're going to have service gas. So get that refrigerant back. And I had a contractor raise his hand, and he said, "Who buys our gas?"
Wow.
And I went, whoa. And then I looked over at my distributor. I said, aren't you involved in reclamation? No, we don't have a program here. And I went, what?
Yeah, so I hate to hear that, because it really takes every piece of the chain. Yeah. It's not just reclaimers such as Hudson who are going to solve the problem. It's not just contractors or technicians. It's distributors, it's OEMs, it's everybody throughout that chain all really has to participate. And it starts with education, and then it goes to facilitating, making it as easy as possible. And we all have a role to play.
Yeah, we really did. And that was what really made me think that even as much as we talk about this, I don't think we're talking enough about it yet.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to somebody at breakfast this morning and said, you could argue there's about 500,000 technicians in the country as a number. I feel like maybe I've spoken to 75,000, but the 425 still need to hear the message.
And they don't know.
And they don't know that they don't know.
Yeah. And because like many of you that are listening to us today, you've probably heard one of our other podcasts. So you at least know that something is going on. You know that there's a buzz in the air. And so you've been paying attention, and we're diving pretty deep into this. But think about all of your friends that have never listened to one of these podcasts that we've done. We've done these for over a year, almost 2 years.
I think you and I have been podcasting for 2 years at least.
Yeah. And then to think that there's that many people who have never listened to what we're helping you understand. So make sure when you're listening to this that you find that one of your friends and go, do you know about this? Did you know? If not, we got a source. You can find out.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely, right? Because it comes back to, it takes all of us. Yeah. We have to help educate everyone. And there's lots of ways to do that. There's lots of contracting networks. There's the folks that do, as you say, do you know?
Yeah. So for those that are listening, let's think of some maybe misperceptions that they've heard, within the industry. The one, definitely not going back to R-410A, not going back to R-22.
Not at all.
We're pushing forward. And so that being said, let's think about some of the misperceptions that maybe technicians have had in the past about the value, the importance of reclaiming, and how it can affect service gas long term. So when we look at things like the HFC phase down that we're going through, right, that's for new refrigerants. And if we were to look at that alone, we would say, well, we've got about a decade of even our new refrigerants for residential, R-32 and 454B, both being affected by the HFC phase down for newly manufactured refrigerant. So on the service side, a technician could make all the difference in the world between having service gas in 10 years and not.
It's absolutely right. So that every single technician out there holds the fate of every system owner in their hands. That's a really powerful way to think about it.
Yeah.
Because if every individual technician standing at a unit doesn't make the choice to recover that refrigerant and then send it through the reclamation process, then somewhere at some point there's going to be a system owner that needed that pound of refrigerant that can't get it.
Yeah, that could have been their brother, sister, grandma, aunt, uncle that is going to call them, go, hey, my contractor was out here and they said that they can't get any refrigerant to service my system. Do you know anything about that, or did you have anything to do with that? Tell me about it, because I'm going to bring you here to Christmas and we're going to have a conversation about what you're doing.
Yeah, and you're going to buy me a new refrigeration system.
And you're going to buy me something new, because they wanted $1,000 a pound for this stuff. And why is it that high? And
yeah. No, I mean, it really is that simple in some respects. I mean, if you think about, and I think we've talked before, there's still hundreds of thousands of pounds of CFCs circulating through the reclamation business to keep systems operating that haven't been manufactured since 1995.
Yeah.
So contractors today are still able to install a residential 410A unit.
Yeah.
That person buying the unit wants to get 15 years from that unit's lifetime.
Oh, absolutely.
And if we don't have that recovered gas and we're not doing the reclamation, somewhere along the line, we will get to a point where that practically brand new system may not be able to be serviced.
Wouldn't that be a hard conversation to have?
It would be a very hard conversation. And think forward too, if you're a contractor or a technician that's not recovering, and all of these mandates for states or federal or lack of availability, and someone says, well, what refrigerant did you send me for recovery?
Yeah.
I can't sell you any reclaimed refrigerant because you didn't put it into the pool, so you can't take out of the pool. Mm-hmm. And I think it's something that it's in this phase down is very different than previous. And I think it's probably going to be a reality for some folks if they don't start to participate.
It's already. So I've talked to one distributor that they are putting into plan their A2L disbursement to their contractors. Those contractors are going to be required to be reclaiming and returning refrigerant to be on the supply list.
Wow.
Now, that's a big statement.
That's a huge statement, but props to them, right, of really tying the two things together.
Yeah, because they're looking at it, they're going, okay, so we're going to have reduced supply of this going forward. Who are we going to sell it to? It's not about we're going to have this ample supply and we can sell all we want to everyone and continue making profit. No, it's about you're going to have an allocation and it's going to have to be used appropriately. So what's the most appropriate use? Well, the most appropriate use is to get it in the hands of the most qualified contractors, the most responsible contractors that's going to be bringing reclaimed gas back so that I can work with Hudson to get it reclaimed and I can bring that back into my own distribute network. And so the distributor is now looking at it as it's equity. That's an asset for them to make sure they're getting that reclaimed gas through them.
Yeah. And that concept of it being an asset applies all through the chain for the contractor, for the technician, for the wholesaler. Sure. If everybody thinks about that pound of refrigerant as an asset, we'll change the reclamation market overnight. Yeah,
no, I absolutely would. You know, I can reflect back on my days when I was in grocery refrigeration, and we still had a lot of R-22 medium temp racks, a lot of them. And then we had all of our R-22 rooftop units that were coming down. And so it was required for us to document to the ounce the amount of refrigerant that was recovered out of those rooftops when they were repaired or when they went through the replacement. And then we would use companies that would come in, do the recovery for us. But then we actually took that back and had it processed and brought it right back into our own internal storage. And so we were actually creating our own circular environment of refrigerant, and it didn't affect our supply very much because we had refrigerant around because we were repurposing it for all of the right reasons. And so I started thinking about our industry and like if we follow that model, that's success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And absolutely is.
If we don't, it's failure.
Yes. Well, one could call possibly, a disaster as well.
Yeah. But, all right. Yeah. Okay. So if we start thinking about the technicians, we start thinking about our contractors, our business owners, and our local distributors, and in our equipment manufacturers, we're all a part of this environment. And I think it's important for everyone to know that there's going to be a time in the near future where reclaimed gas is actually going to be going into new equipment as requirements.
Yeah. And so it's kind of an interesting new dynamic, right? A little bit of that happened with the California regulation for OEMs before, the A2Ls came in. And so a number of OEMs actually did put reclaim into their brand new equipment. So the path has been forged already, but under Subsection H, yes, fast forward a few years, and that's the path that we're heading down, is that reclaimed refrigerant would actually go into brand new equipment before it gets commissioned.
Yeah. And I had a conversation, which I thought was really intriguing when we were talking about refrigerant. So when we're manufacturing something new, we know the ingredients that are going into it. And so we put those ingredients into it and we package it up and we send it off, right? That's how manufacturing works. If I go buy a box of cereal, I know the ingredients that goes into that cereal. It gets packaged and it gets sent out. It doesn't mean that every box is sampled.
Right.
Right?
Yep, exactly.
So when we start talking about reclaimed refrigerant, that's a whole different story.
It absolutely is. And every pound of every reclaimed refrigerant is part of a batch, and every batch is tested against AHRI 700. So every single element of that process is documented, is tested, is certified, has to be certified by an AHRI 700 lab to be able to call it reclaimed refrigerant, and it has to meet AHRI 700. So as Hudson, we've invested in AHRI lab certification. We're not the only ones. There's a few companies that are out there. But as you're kind of saying, brand new production doesn't have to be AHRI certified. Reclaimed does, and you get that assurity that you know exactly what you're getting for the purity, the components, the acidity, the moisture, all of that is very well documented. So when folks say, well, we're not really sure if we could use it in new equipment, if you put a pound of reclaimed refrigerant next to a pound of virgin, you couldn't tell the difference unless I told you which one was which.
Yeah, that's super important, because then we start thinking, okay, well, if it gets to the point where we're going to need some of our service gas for new equipment, that means our service gas gets even more scarce, which amplifies the importance for us to recover.
Yep. Yeah, all roads are leading to recovery through reclamation will be critical for our industry.
There's a lot of change going on right now.
There really is. There really is. Keeps me up at night some nights.
I know it does. People are like, wow, what's changing this week? I'm like, let's talk about what changed today. We'll start there.
Right.
Well, Kate, this is wonderful. I always love our conversations because it's so stimulating to see what's happening in our industry. And you're always bringing like the freshest perspective of what's going on in your side of the industry. And I encourage everyone to learn more about Hudson. Where can we learn about Hudson?
So visit us on www.hudsontech.com, HUDSONTECH. And my Australian accent comes right through on the H's there. We've got a lot of information. And so sign up for our newsletter. We send a lot of information about regulation, how it's going to affect what's happening in the industry, talking about reclamation, talking about service and things like that. So a lot of stuff there. And thank you as always for having me on. Really enjoy it.
I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.